From the City of Angels off the Pacific Ocean, good morning, good evening, wherever you may be across the nation, around the world. I'm George Norrie, and welcome to Coast AM. Later tonight, those open lines and the Rage Hotline. Here's what's happening. All around this country, there are 149 small airports, and due to budget restraints, the FAA is going to close 149 air traffic towers. The Federal Aviation Administration announcing it will close those air traffic control towers in a move that one maker says was akin to removing stoplights and stop signs from our roads. Now, the reason they're doing this, of course, is the sequester. They're having budget problems. But these airports apparently are not going to close down. What the FAA is recommending. Now, keep in mind, air traffic towers are important because they land planes and they allow planes to take off. There's a communication there. Well, what will happen at these small airports now, the pilots themselves will communicate with each other on takeoff and landings. Now, the FAA says, hey, they know how to do this. It's procedure. I'm not sure I'd want to fly out of those little airports. A few years ago, a story was reported about a gigantic, devastating series of earthquakes that will happen more frequently at the San Andreas Fault than previously thought. Geologists from the University of California, Irvine, and the Arizona State University concluded that the largest quake strikes will hit the San Andreas every 45 to 144 years. Now, the last big one was 1857. That's over 150 years ago, so we're overdue. While it's possible the fault is experiencing a natural lull, the scientists think it's more likely that a major quake could happen soon. One expert on quakes who monitors these kinds of stories, Stan Dale. Stan, are we due for the big one?
Yes, George, I think so. In fact, it's getting close. There's some very unusual activity across the planet, and particularly along the West Coast. For the last 8 days, I've been monitoring Los Angeles and San Francisco signals, you know, the electrical and thermal signals that the earthquake is building. And something big appears to be building. And to kind of underscore that, I looked at the average number of earthquakes of any value in California for the last, 10 days. And in the last 2 days, that average has dropped 40%.
That's huge.
Pressure is building somewhere. And I can see it. It's centered, I hate to tell you this, but kind of around where Los Angeles is. Between there and San Diego, it seems to be the biggest pressure buildup. But you guys there in California aren't the only ones that are seeing something strange. Down in Central America, in southern Mexico, in Panama, in Ecuador, Colombia, all those areas down there for the past 10 days at least, I've been seeing extraordinary pressure buildup along the fault line or of the tectonic plate there. It may be about to split and form a new section to the plate there.
Now, Stan, when you see this kind of pressure, when you see this kind of movement, generally, when does a big earthquake occur?
Well, the window is 1 to 7 days, but the big ones usually go 7 to 10 days before.
Jeez, so we're talking within a couple weeks then.
Well, right now you're talking within about 3 or 4 days.
Can you be wrong?
Yep. I put that out there. I can be wrong. 10 to 15% of the time, I don't get it right. So I'm just telling you, get this. One of my data sources, their computer absolutely is gone troppo over in Europe, and 1/3 of my data set I can't get to, which is a very important set for California. So I can't be positive on the signal I'm seeing right now that how big it is or, how likely it is to convert. But there's other things happening. I mean, there's a 2 million square mile area up from Newfoundland, the Gulf of St. Lawrence, up to Iceland, a 2 million square mile area that suddenly rapidly dropped temperature in the sea 2 days ago. And it's still dropped, and I'm hoping it'll warm up a bit. But at the same time, there was a temperature drop on the other side of the planet underneath Tasmania.
Now, what does that tell you?
There's something going on in the core of this planet. Those pressure zones in Central America I was telling you about, the antipodal point, or the opposite point of the planet, is underneath the tip of India, And I put it on my website, a warning on the 14th of March. Something extremely weird is happening inside the planet because that area is rapidly heating in 5 hot spots, while over exactly opposite that, pressure is building up on the plates to form seismic eruptions and volcanoes all the way down to Ecuador.
You can trace Stan's work, by the way, at StanDeyo.com. Stan, let's stay in touch with each other.
You bet.
Okay, my friend. I have a feeling you may be right on this one. Whoa. Let's hope not. But like he said, he's got 85% certainty accuracy there. The space rock that hit Earth 65 million years ago and is widely implicated in the end of the dinosaurs was probably a speeding comet, according to scientists. You know, for years, we all talked about an asteroid, perhaps 5-6 miles long. They are saying because of the speed that they were able to predict, they're pretty sure this was a comet that hit us, not an asteroid. Now, for this smaller space rock to have produced a 180-kilometer wide crater, it must have been traveling relatively quickly, and that's where, again, they think it was a comet. And this, of course, is right out there in the Gulf of Mexico. A sonic boom of some sort caused windows and walls to shake over several counties in northern central Florida Thursday night. County sheriff's officials say that they think maybe it was the military maneuvering of some kind. Nobody knows for sure. Next Thursday, our investigative reporter Linda Moulton Howe will cover part of these stories, these large booms that people are hearing all over the place. Scientists in Italy are working on genetically modified foods. Oh, no, this time a new apple for people who are allergic to apples. So you can look for that to pop out pretty soon. Salad labeled as ready to eat, they say, is more dangerous than beef burgers, according to Britain's top food experts, following a rash of infections linked to the product. Certain types of bacteria found in the pre-cut salad bags can almost be impossible to kill. Now, they say that you have to irradiate the leaves, but the public is opposed to that. So this infection, they said, in England, for example, affected 300 people just from these salads. A former chef who killed his wife and cooked her body for 4 days to dispose of her remains, sentenced to only 15 years life in prison. That's it. He had argued with his wife. He bound her mouth, hands, and feet with duct tape because he didn't want her to go out while she was intoxicated. He gets 15 years for this after he cooked her body for 4 years. I don't get it. We're going to talk about rage, by the way, when we have open lines. We're going to have a special hotline for you for that. The nationwide shortage of ammunition has left many police departments around the country scrambling to get their hands on the necessary rounds, with some even bartering with other departments. In Wilton, Maine, state officials there seized 75 dogs and puppies, 24 birds, including 3 chickens, at a mobile home after finding some of them sick and obviously in unsanitary conditions. The home of Nancy Champagne was searched by state animal welfare agents back in March, about a week ago, after a complaint was filed, and officials got a search warrant, and they went in and found all those animals there. Now, we're still getting reports of a lot of strange things in the skies. Maybe a meteor shower. Who knows what? Let's check in with Peter Davenport from the National UFO Reporting Center. Peter, what are people seeing these days?
Good evening, George, and thanks again for the invitation to appear tonight. I don't know what people are seeing, but during my last appearances, I've reported that there's been a serious reduction in the number of reports to our center anyway. I believe it's the same to MUFON. And when I got home about 45 minutes ago from a friend's birthday celebration, I was hoping that I'd be able to report the same thing tonight because that reduces my workload. But my anticipation was wrong. I came back to a flurry of phone calls on the hotline from North Carolina, Pennsylvania, Long Island, New York, Staten Island, New York, Connecticut, Virginia, Maryland, New Hampshire, and again, Connecticut, a second call. So I haven't talked with these people yet, George, but most of them sounded like very serious-minded people submitting serious reports about something that truly alarmed them tonight. If any of our listeners in those areas or on the East Coast generally have seen anything tonight, I would welcome written reports from them submitted via our online report forum at ufocenter.com. So don't know what's going on. Recently, we've had, even though there's been a reduction in the number of reports, the reports of red, orange, and yellow fireballs are continuing.
Yes, they sure are. Everywhere.
Had a recent report a very dramatic report from Coral Gables, Florida. The guy is an A&P mechanic, as I recall. He knows which end of the airplane is supposed to go forward, so he's probably a very good witness. He said he was shocked to see 4 blood-red, bright fireballs larger than a planet move across the sky in a leisurely fashion and then suddenly disappear from sight. A similar report from Bellingham, very similar to the sightings from Ocala, Florida, which you invited me to comment last week. I never got to that comment, but we're getting a lot of very strange reports of these fireballs, and I urge the coast-to-coast listeners, if they see one of these displays, to write down all of the details and please submit a report. So we're still getting reports, and I wish I understood what these things are, George, but I don't. They intrigue me, and I hope someday there's a resolution to our question about the UFO phenomenon.
Sooner than later, Peter. Thank you so much. Peter Davenport from the UFO Center, National UFO Reporting Center, his website, ufocenter.com. He's one of the foremost writers of mysteries, UFOs, the strange, the unusual, Lee Spiegel. He joins us next on Coast to Coast AM. And welcome back to Coast. I'm George Norrie. Lee Spiegel with us, of course, writer, reporter, media personality. He has spent almost his entire life presenting the world of unexplained phenomena and the paranormal to you. Also writes now for the Huffington Post. Lee, always a pleasure. How are you?
Well, it's the great and powerful George. I'm good. How are you doing?
Sound like the Wizard of Oz.
You know, I've been meaning to ask you, have you completely cleaned off all the doomsday dust from your clothes yet since December?
Not entirely, but mostly. Hey, speaking of strange things, the Huffington Post, I was getting emails from people today. Are you folks soliciting stories on people who have had encounters with extraterrestrials?
I'm not sure how much of that is true. I heard something like that. One of the other divisions was...
Somebody blogged it.
What I think is going on is they may be looking for stories about like children and people who've had like close encounters of the fourth kind, possible abductions.
Yes.
It hasn't been made completely clear to me, but I'm going to find out about that because it should come through my desk once they finalize something like that.
That's right. What's new with you these days, Lee?
Well, you know, I was actually just happy to hear Peter Davenport. You know, I did a story last week about, I thought it would be interesting to let people know almost where they could go to see a UFO and how to plan that kind of an event or a trip. And I basically put together a who's who of databases that people should be looking at, and the first database in my story was Peter's National UFO Reporting Center. I think that if rather than people just trying to haphazardly look into the sky and wonder if they're going to see something tonight, they could actually almost make a date with possible UFO experience by looking at patterns that have been accumulated over decades by people like Peter in their databases to find out what areas of the country, what cities, what localities have had not just occasionally UFO encounters, but there are places that have sightings 2 and 3 days in a row.
No, you're absolutely right. And Peter, as you know, Lee, is a no-nonsense guy. And
that's right.
He gets right to it.
And he's been doing this for a long time, and he's very serious. And, in fact, on his website, the site doesn't make any claims to validate the information and the reports that people make, and he does everything he can to omit and eliminate obvious hoaxes, which is a huge problem these days.
So in terms of the stories you've uncovered, and you've done some great stories through the Huffington Post that then get picked up by some of the mainstream media, which I find welcome. It's about time that they start doing that. and don't have to rely on programs like ours, but they're going to sources like you now. Of everything you've tried to unravel, what story is still the baffling one for you?
Wow. Most baffling. Well, for some reason, the word Bigfoot pops into my head, and I didn't intend for it to do that. Because I have a little bit of an issue. I'm fascinated by the whole Bigfoot culture and issue, and I'm also annoyed by things that have happened in the media in the last few months about alleged Bigfoot DNA. There's been some stuff that's gone on, and I'm pretty sure you've done shows about this as well, where
we sure have, yeah.
The whole Bigfoot DNA coming under the microscope, and
the camp, the Bigfoot camp, is not joined on this. There's a group out there that is happy that researcher Melba Ketchum has announced this DNA discovery, but there's another group out there that is working with Brian Sykes, a geneticist, and they say, no way, not real, inaccurate, and they're fighting.
Yes, they're fighting, and part of the problem, George, is Melba Ketchum spent 5 years with a team of researchers, and they supposedly looked at more than 100 samples of alleged Bigfoot DNA that came from various places. It was supposedly Bigfoot blood, hair samples, a toenail in one case. Mm-hmm. And after 5 years of looking through these things, investigating it, doing forensics analysis, she released her findings at the end of last year and announced that she was now looking for a peer-reviewed scientific journal that would support her claims, that would confirm the 5 years that she put into this work. And that's where I think, and many other people think, she kind of went astray because of this whole debacle about the scientific journal that was announced.
Well, is it even a scientific journal?
Well, I'm not going to cast aspersions anywhere. All that I know is that, according to Melba's own words on her own website, she said that she was having a very tough time getting any legitimate scientists or serious journals to look at her material, as if it was all forbidden fruit and they wouldn't touch it. And so she acquired, that was the word she used, I believe, on her website. Basically, she bought a little-known scientific journal, renamed it, called it the De Novo Scientific Journal, and apparently published her findings in it as if they were peer-reviewed findings. And everybody came down on her for this. And well, they should have, because, and I heard from her camp, and they contacted me and said, Melba doesn't think that you at Huffington Post gave her a fair shake. Well, come on. I gave her the fairest shake possible. I never said in any of my stories that her 5-year analysis and research was wrong, or I never ridiculed it. I never said that she'd made any mistakes. The only problem that I had was all of a sudden in her anxiety or zeal to get the information out as fast as she could, she went through this whole thing about this De Novo Scientific Journal, and most skeptics and even some believers said, no, this is not a real scientific journal. It just came out of nowhere. I went to the contact page, George, of the De Novo Scientific Journal, hoping to find a list of the scientific board, scientific editor-in-chief. But I didn't see anything there. Instead, what I found, it said De Novo Scientific Journal, and then on the other side of the page, in lighter print, it said copyright Devono Scientific Journal. I went, they couldn't even get the name right on their own page. I mean, it's like I said to Melba's folks, look, I will write another story, and I will write a story that will support her findings if, in fact, you guys can put me in touch with serious, legitimate scientists who will look at the information and give it a non-biased point of view and analysis.
That's so important. Lee, we're going to take this quick break. We're going to come back, talk more with you about that. Plus, you're working on a story with our very own friend, Dr. Roger Lear, about alien implants. I'm George Norrie, back in a moment on Coast to Coast AM. Well, for you iPhone users and Android users, our new apps are finished, complete, and they are out for you. They are free. You can pick them up in the Google Play Store or the iTunes Store or the link at coasttocoastam.com. And welcome back to Coast to Coast. Lee, we'll talk about Roger Lear in just a moment. But, you know, you're absolutely right. If you can get some peered scientists to look at these DNA results and maybe come up with their own conclusions, you might have something.
Well, I told Melba months ago, and I told her associates just a few weeks ago that because they say they're claiming that there are other scientists who've been looking at the material and who are giving it some serious consideration. So I've said, fine, put me in touch with these scientists. Let me talk to them. I'll do another story in support of your conclusions and in support of their conclusions, because it would be a huge story if all the work done by Ketchum and her team led to the scientific confirmation of the reality of Sasquatch. But there are little wrinkles right now in the credibility, and I think people don't completely understand the concept of credibility when it comes to a lot of the topics that I write about and that you talk about all the time.
That's one of the things I think, Lee, knowing you over the years, that frustrates you more than anything. That's people who, of course, go into research and they don't tell the truth. Oh,
yes, and exactly. And not only that, and I think you probably have hit this kind of thing yourself, there are a couple of things in common that all these topics that you and I deal with. Two things in common that they all have: a giggle factor and a ridicule factor.
On both ends. Yep.
Yeah. And I think those two factors need to be replaced by what I call the credibility factor. And I especially run into this with people I call the armchair critics, who will write comments of many of my stories, and they feel like they have the freedom of speech that gives them the right to ridicule others who have just tried to talk about experiences that they've had with, for example, UFOs, ghosts, Bigfoot, the paranormal. And I see a lot of this in the readers interacting with each other, and it bothers me that there is this attitude out there, the giggle and ridicule factor. So I came up with what I call my credibility factor checklist. I'm starting to.
You go right through it, each one, huh?
Well, yeah. Would you like to hear part of my checklist?
Yeah, sure. Let's go through it.
When skeptics or debunkers say there's nothing to any of this UFO stuff, absolutely nothing. It's all crap. Let's move on to something else. I start in like this. I say, have you done any serious research or investigation into UFOs?
And they say no, right?
And they say no. And then I say, have you ever spoken to commercial, private, or military pilots who've had very close encounters with unexplained objects? And, of course, they say no. Have you ever read any declassified government documents from the United States or the UK that confirm many unexplained UFO encounters by credible military eyewitnesses? Well, no, I guess I haven't done that, they say. And then I'll say, well, have you ever spoken to any of the many groups of people who have been involved in multiple witness UFO sightings that remained unexplained, like Fife Symington of Arizona?
That's right. Former governor, or the you know what? The late, if they had a chance to talk with him, Gordon Cooper, the astronaut pilot.
Well, you know, I was the first person that Gordon Cooper talked about his UFO experiences when I interviewed him in 1975.
He was compelling, wasn't he?
He was totally compelling. I mean, George, he was telling me stuff that I was finding hard to believe. He said to me, you know, I'm friends with some scientists who are actually working on a time machine.
I love that.
Out of my chair.
I love that. Didn't he film something and they took the film from him and he never saw it? It was in the 1950s, before he became an astronaut. He was like a flight test
director out at Edwards Air Force Base, okay? And one day he had a film crew that was out there on the dry lake bed. They were just doing some filming of whatever, some kind of routine stuff. As they were out there with their cameras, this saucer came down. 3 tripod-like legs came out from it, underneath it, and the thing landed gently on the dry lake bed. And the film crew contacted Gordon, who was not on the dry lake bed. He was in a building somewhere, and they said, "Well, this thing just happened. What should we do?" And he said, "You've got cameras. Film it
now."
And they did. And as they filmed it, the thing gently lifted up. The legs went back. They retracted into the craft. The thing just took off. The films were sent and brought over to Gordon. He looked at the films, and then he was ordered to send them to Washington, where, in his words, they were never seen again.
Isn't that amazing? Coming from an astronaut, a pilot, this guy has no reason to lie.
No. And I got to know him over several years, and for my UFOs, The Credibility Factor album documentary that I did for CBS in '75, Gordon told me that he was part of a group of pilots in Germany where they were chasing groups or squadrons of circular-shaped craft that were flying over the airbase several days in a row, and they could never get high enough or close enough to these things.
That's amazing. And then there was Apollo 14 astronaut Edgar Mitchell.
Yeah.
Another great source.
Edgar Mitchell will say, and he has said to me and other journalists, that he himself has never seen a UFO or something that he could not identify. But
absolutely
he believes,
correct.
From all the people that he has talked with, and he's done his own investigation, he believes that we are being visited. And the man grew up in Roswell, and he believes what the stories tell about Roswell.
Well, and he has said people in the know have told him without any hesitation that we're being visited.
Yeah, exactly. And yet the debunkers and the skeptics and the 15 seconds of fame armchair critics, there's that giggle factor, that ridicule factor. Stan Friedman, and in fact, when I introduced Stan a few weeks ago at the International UFO Congress, and I gave him the Lifetime Achievement Award, the way I introduced him was, as you have introduced him many times, I said, Stan Friedman is the first person I ever interviewed.
He has an effect. He has an effect on all of us, doesn't he?
Yep. And what he told me in 1975 when I interviewed him for my UFO album, and I never forgot this, he said, when somebody says that bit of UFO behavior is impossible, what they're really saying is, I don't know how to do that, so it must be impossible because that means nobody else can do it either. And there's the problem. That's the attitude that people have. If I can't do it, well, then it can't be done by anybody.
That is so true. Now, let's talk a little bit about Roger Leir. Dr. Roger Leir, of course, he performs and has other doctors work with him, surgeries on people who claim that they have something in their body, some kind of an implant. He doesn't know exactly where they all come from, but he works on trying to get them out. I witnessed, Lee, years ago, one of his surgeries, and it was absolutely strange and bizarre. The surgeon would try to go in there and grab this little thing that was in this woman's cheek, up in her face, and this thing would move. It would escape. I mean, it was like it had a brain to itself. They finally got it out, tested it. It was just it's a strange piece of metal.
And Roger will not just operate on anybody who comes to him and says, I think I have an alien implant in me. He never set out to do it like that. He kind of fell into it, and he started removing some things that were just bothering people, and as a surgeon, he had a personal responsibility to help them out. And yet things started happening where he's working with this chemist, Steve Colburn, who's been on your show too. And Colburn has done chemistry analysis on a lot of these objects, and they're saying that a membrane forms around the objects, and it makes it really difficult for a scalpel to cut through.
That's true. Whitley Strieber still has a piece of one near his ear that they can't get out, and they're afraid to go in and get it, because they might do more damage.
Yeah, I can understand that. And now Roger Lear's associates, they're saying that they've been able to detect some kind of radio frequencies associated with these little objects. Well, if that's true, then is somebody tagging human beings, and for what purpose? And I even asked Roger, I said, now you've done like 15 or 16 of these surgeries, so you've only really pulled out about 16 objects, but how widespread could you imagine this must be? How many people have these things inside of them, and who put them in there? These people had things removed by Roger Lear, and he discovered that in no places was there any telltale scar of how the things were even put
Exactly,
into
because in the beginning, Lee, I would think, okay, maybe when these people were kids, they stepped on something, a little piece of a nail broke off in them, a piece of glass, something. That's not the case.
Right, because these things aren't always in a person's toe. One person had it behind on the back of his hand. Another person had it on the shoulder. You said you saw the surgery from a woman's cheek. So these things are appearing in different places in people's bodies, and now some of the scientists who are looking at this are saying this is some form of nanotechnology that's really sophisticated. And I believe you also had on the show physicist Robert Kuntz.
Yes, we've had them all.
And I spoke to Robert a few days ago, and he said to me, I'm convinced, and damned what the other physicists say, I'm convinced that an advanced civilization has created these things because we don't know how to do this. Well, you know the phrase, the old Carl Sagan phrase, extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence.
Right. I'm not, Lee, I'm not sure that these are being done for, benevolent purposes.
Really?
I just think that there's something afoot here.
Well, yeah. I mean, and I don't even like to speculate one way or the other because I don't know, and I'm afraid to speculate, quite frankly. If somebody is doing this, and if it's not anyone on Earth, well then, who is and for what purpose? I couldn't possibly fathom a reason why, but it's like some humans are being tagged like we tag animals.
That's
and
true.
I find that very scary and a little creepy.
A lot of strange things going on. Tell me a little bit about your work with Grant Cameron. What's going on there?
Well, Grant is the new International UFO Congress Researcher of the Year.
Well, he deserves it. He's great.
Well, yeah. I mean, the work that he's done, specifically targeting information, tons of information over decades of UFOs and presidents. Nobody has the kind of website information that he does. I mean, maybe John Greenwald with the Black Vault has this information within his site, but Grant specifically has targeted UFOs and presidents. I mean, I was researching stuff on his site that I didn't know about. Did you know that Eleanor Roosevelt, in 1950, she was the host of a weekend television talk show when television was in its infancy? The name of the show was Today with Mrs. Roosevelt. And she was a very outspoken...
I'm sure it was one of those little black and white shows, huh?
Yes, with a gigantic microphone in front of her face.
Yeah, exactly.
And she was very outspoken First Lady, and during one of her interviews, she was very interested in the man she was talking to, who was an airline captain who described a rapidly moving circular UFO with windows that kept crossing the path of his plane, and she was spellbound by the interview. I never heard that story before, but it's a true story.
Do you remember the old television show, Science Fiction Theater?
Sure.
My dad would watch that every time. I think it was on Sundays, and he would just watch it all the time.
Yeah, well, I remember watching that, and and other shows like that, and wondering, is this really science fiction? or could this actually happen?
Well, I mean, they were so good. I mean, that aired back in 55 to 57. I remember watching it with my dad. So I was like 5 years old, you know?
Well, and you see how you turned out?
See, that's what happened. They trained me. They did this to me.
That's right. Do you know about the former New Hampshire state legislator who claimed in a videotape that he made a couple of years ago, and he only wanted to go on record once with this. He said, "I'm not talking to reporters. I'm just going to make this videotape, and here it is." And it can be found all over the internet. He basically said that while he was a New Hampshire legislator, he saw an official briefing document to Dwight Eisenhower informing the president of an alleged presence of extraterrestrials in America, and the briefing document suggested that Eisenhower could meet with them.
Was that Henry McElroy? Was that him?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
Yes.
That's a great story.
Yeah, and just kind of a great video. It just kind of happened out of nowhere, and he's sitting there behind a desk, and he's basically saying, "I want to tell this. I'm only going to tell it once, and I'm not talking about it ever again afterwards." It was like, wow, okay. And again, Grant pulled this kind of stuff together, put it on his website. Lots of things. Gerald Ford called for a full-blown investigation of UFOs in his home state of Michigan while he was a congressman. But then when he became president, he never said a word again about UFOs. Why not?
You must just have a great time writing these columns, Lee.
Well, I do, because I learn something all the time, and I'm constantly giving myself my own credibility factor checklist. So it's like when I say to people, "Have you done serious research or investigation?" Well, I can check off yes, because this is what I do all the time, and I'm always learning new things and talking to people. I met Roger Lear for the first time at the Arizona conference a few weeks ago. I've known about him, read about him, but we finally met, and I thought the man was a lovely man, totally honest, nothing weird or wacko.
No, he's a straight shooter.
Yeah, and to meet people like these two law enforcement officers who are part of an organization called, have you heard of these guys? The Navajo Rangers?
I have not.
Well, these guys, they're totally law enforcement in and around the state of Arizona, and they are the only, because they're Native Americans, they're the only officers allowed to go onto the reservation and do investigations into UFO sightings, Bigfoot, paranormal, and witchcraft. And two of the rangers were at the conference, and they did an amazing presentation of evidence and pictures that they've come up with. And I'm going to do a story about them because I just find that totally fascinating.
That is fascinating.
Yeah.
That is. So, Lee, do you travel much?
Haven't done as much travel as I would like. Like I said, I was in Arizona for a week. I was the master of ceremonies of the Congress there.
Saw a video of you. You look good.
Oh, well, thank you, sir. Thank you. Trying to keep my appearances.
You got a face for TV, Spiegel.
Well, you and I are both. Well, you're doing a lot more TV than I am on your show.
Well, we're having fun. Hey, stick around, Lee. We're going to take this quick break. We're going to come back. We're going to take phone calls and more stories with you with our special guest, investigator, reporter Lee Spiegel. And, of course, you can find his link of the HuffingtonPost.com/Lee-Spiegel linked up for you. Very easy at coasttocoastam.com. And we're going to have open lines for you next hour. I'm also going to open up the Rage hotline for you. We're going to keep Lee Spiegel for another hour with your calls. Every line is lit. And, look, I'm here for you, so we're going to keep going for a little bit. We'll be back in a moment on Coast to Coast AM. Welcome back with Lee Spiegel, your phone calls as well. Lee, what keeps driving you? You keep going for these stories.
I just have amazing curiosity about so many things, and there's just something internally that makes me tend to believe in more of the things than not. And when I write my stories, George, like I said before, I try and stay neutral so my readers don't always know how I'm really feeling about a subject one way or the other. But I do absolutely strongly believe that Earth is being visited by someone. And I don't necessarily think they're coming from other planets. I used to think that in the beginning, but now as I talk to physicists who are telling me that there are things involving other possible dimensions and other realities where we could be getting visits from someone who don't live all that far away from us.
Yeah, that's true.
I'm just fascinated by that.
What about the hollow Earth theory, Lee, and that they might be coming from there?
Yeah,
that they were always there.
I know, and I used to read stories about how Admiral Richard Byrd, discovered an entrance into, I guess it was the southern polar entrance to a whole world where there was an inner sun, and people used to write about how the northern lights and the aurora borealis was actually a reflection of the inner sun of the planet, that's keeping the inner inhabitants warm and dry, and that many of the UFOs, when they just simply vanish and go away, well, they go back to the center of the Earth. I mean, I've loved those stories. One of my favorite movies of all time was Journey to the Center of the Earth.
I loved it. As a matter of fact, when I got to know Pat Boone, it was fun. We had him on the program talking about his career, but especially that movie. And the redo wasn't quite like the old one, was it?
No, not at all. His was the best. It was the most classic. I loved it. And when I actually interviewed Pat last year about his ideas about doomsday, and he told me that he often goes and does stage performances now where he'll come out on stage and he'll show clips to an audience of various movies that he's done. And I said, Pat, you know what? You only need to show one thing on stage. Show Journey to the Center of the Earth. Nothing else.
I went to lunch with him a few months ago, and I started singing April Love. He got a kick out of that. And I did it in tune, Lee.
Ah, okay.
That's the big thing. Let's take some calls.
Have you done any singing yet on your TV show?
No, but I do it at events when I speak around the country.
Ah, okay.
We have little bands and combos there, and, we send them the songs ahead of time, and then we do a quick rehearsal, and it's perfect. See,
this is a whole side to George Norrie that the audience is just finding out about.
It was a little hobby that I just have some fun with. You got to have fun, right?
Oh, yeah. Well, yes. And, I try not to have too much fun, because if I do, and then I try to tell someone about a UFO experience I had, well, nobody's going to believe me.
That's right. Exactly. Let's go to the phones. Let's go to Dobson, North Carolina. Greg's turn on Coast to Coast. Hey, Greg, go ahead.
Hey, George. Hello, Lee.
Hey, Greg, how you doing?
I'm good. Thank you very much. I was really hesitant to call tonight because I have no idea what this is. But in the palm of my left hand, I have two little, it's like somebody had stuck a couple of ball bearings under my hand. They're a little bigger than BBs. They're about an inch away from my left hand ring finger. And I can get really up close and look at it, and honest to God, I have no idea how they got there. There's no scars or anything like that around them, and I never even realized, as many times as you look at your own hands, I can't even remember when I first saw them.
Now, when you say you saw them, what is it? It's inside you, right?
Oh, yeah.
So it looks like a bump?
It's two small bumps, one over top of the other, about a quarter of an inch away from each other. And I would say probably they're a quarter of an inch in diameter.
Wow, that's good. Says, have you ever had them x-rayed?
No, I haven't.
Okay, I would do that. What are the possibilities this is calcification, Lee?
Well, see, I don't know. The question I have for Greg is, when you look at your hand, are these bumps of a light color, or can you see under the skin? Are they dark or are they a light color?
You can't see under the skin. Everything is the same flesh tone. There's not a darkness under it or lightness, either one.
Okay. Now, the other question I have is, do you ever have any discomfort from this?
No. No.
Right,
I can actually...
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
It's okay. I can actually push on them. They don't move, and they don't hurt when I push on them. But there's a little line right in between both of them. It's like they're connected together by something, like a little strand that runs between the two of them.
Do you have a good, trusting relationship with your primary physician?
No.
You don't? Okay.
No, I don't. I don't much go to the doctor. I'm trying to get my health back, but I'm trying to do it on my own without a doctor, so I don't.
All right, because I would suggest, as George was mentioning before, that at the very least I would try and get an X-ray of your hand to see what it can show, and also if you get in touch with me through Coast to Coast website, and you can get in touch with me through the Huffington Post, I'll put you in touch with Roger Lear, with Dr. Lear.
That'd be great. That's super, Lee.
Okay,
yeah,
so go ahead. And feel.
Thank you,
Greg. Feel comfortable in doing that, in getting in touch with me, because there's no giggle factor or ridicule factor here with me. Okay.
Not at all. Okay, we'll do that. And Lee, if people want to email you, want to give out your email address?
Sure, absolutely. It's Lee Lee.Spiegel SPEIGEL at HuffingtonPost.com.
And you have to have that little dot in there.
Yeah, the dot between the Lee and the Spiegel. Otherwise, your email will go to Alpha Centauri.
It'll never get delivered. Next up, we go to Connecticut. Kevin's with us on Coast to Coast. Hey, Kev, thanks.
Hey, George, those dots are important, man.
Yeah, they sure are.
That's right.
Mr. Spiegel, it's an honor to speak to you. You are truly a very credible man, and I appreciate your time on the platform tonight.
Well, thank you, Kevin. Please call me Lee. Mr. Spiegel was my father.
Yeah, and it makes you sound old, right? Lee, I'm going to take you in sort of a weird direction here for a second.
Okay.
You know, it's March. We up here in Connecticut, we've been snowed in all winter. We get kind of weird. Talking, as you were a while back in the program, about these little doodads, the little metallic anomalies found in people's bodies. And, of course, I've heard about these before. I'm a faithful coast-to-coast listener. But the thing I want to ask you is, as strange as this might sound, I wonder if anybody has ever looked into the possibility that these might in some way be hereditary/genetic. I know how far out that sounds. But I thought of it when you were talking and saying there's no entry scars. There's no evidence as to how these little items get inside people. And even if it's nothing more, I shouldn't say nothing more because it would be pretty significant, but if for some reason there were a genetic alteration made to certain humans a long, long, long time ago to where their bodies were predisposed to collecting certain minerals and elements from the environment, the air, somehow manufacturing these little metallic doodads. I think you see where I'm going, and, you know, like I say, admittedly, it's a little bit weird, but when you said no entry scars, I thought, interesting.
Yeah.
If nothing else, some good coast-to-coast listener is going to make $1 million off the movie of my idea.
Well,
Lee and I are going to a Hollywood producer on Tuesday.
Maybe 500,000.
You know, Kevin, from what I've heard from the people I've talked to so far, the Dr. Roger Lear, Stephen Colbert, the chemist, physicist Robert Kuntz, they all seem to agree that whatever these objects are, that there's some kind of technology about them that we don't have access to right now, unless, of course, our government or some government or some other force that's in charge of this planet has this knowledge and is just randomly picking people to tag them for some reason. But I'm not sure that I believe that that's what's going on, and yet I don't have a better answer. I don't know if there is another civilization out there that even cares enough about human beings to want to do something like this. But obviously, something's going on.
Something's happening.
Yeah, something is weird, and I wish I had the answers, and that's why people like George and me, we keep digging at this stuff to try and get the information out to you folks so that you can make your own evaluation and can come up with an explanation for yourself.
What if these implants, Lee, are live and mechanical, and yet they implant them into the human to alter them? So maybe eventually they change the human being's complexity or something. Possible?
Or something. You know, again, George, when I try and imagine why another civilization would come here.
Well, this is a garden of earthly delights, Lee. It's got everything here.
Is that what we are? I get letters and comments from people who basically say that there's no intelligent life on planet Earth at all. Maybe dolphins.
Dolphins, cats, all of them. But I mean, this planet is teeming with unbelievably different life. They have got to look at this. You know, maybe they're on a planet that has 10 different species of something. I mean, look at the millions and millions on this planet. It's mind-boggling.
It is, and I was just reading earlier today. I just finished a story that we're publishing tomorrow about this new contest that's on now, where people can actually start naming the more than 800 exoplanets that have been discovered. Because as planets get discovered, the International Astronomical Union, they always give them like some technical name, like Kepler-45LQ.
Horrible names. Are these asteroids DD211 or something? By the way, my DD214 was from the military.
Oh yeah.
That's what they give you when you're out, when you retire.
Okay.
DD214. Okay. That's right.
Well, and now people can actually, for $4.99, you actually have to pay $5. You can nominate a name of what is right now the first planet. It's the closest exoplanet to Earth. It's in the Alpha Centauri system, which is only 4.3 light years away from Earth.
Now, when you say nominate a name, that means what?
Well, what it means is for your $5. You can, and they've already got.
You can submit for the $5,
you
right?
can submit a name and they even give you a little box where you can type in what the significance.
And they'll never look at it.
Yeah, and right now, I mean, there's a ton of names already that have been submitted. People have until April 15th to submit their names. And if you don't want to submit a name, but you want to nominate someone else's name, that'll cost you 99 cents.
Do you get your money? Do you get your money back if they don't pick the name?
But the money goes to and this is what I like about it. This organization is called Uwingu. It begins with a U and it ends with a U. It's Swahili for sky, and it's an organization that was created last year of astronomers, of planetary scientists, and businessmen and women to come together to figure out ways of raising money to promote more science and space research and exploration. So what Uwingo is doing first is they're saying, well, we've got 800 exoplanets that have been confirmed. Let's start with the one that's closest to us and see what kind of names that people from around the world will come up with, and there'll be a panel that will choose the best and most popular, and they're giving away prizes.
How much do you think they've raised through this?
I don't know the exact figure now, but I know that they had gone on Kickstarter and actually raised more than they sent.
A lot of people do that.
Yeah, and so they just want to put the money back into space exploration, but to do it in a fun way where people can actually come up with interesting names of planets so that everybody can kind of get on board with it. And
it's like the Star Registry almost, isn't it?
Yeah.
Name a star.
Right, the International Star Registry. But the thing with that is you're not actually naming a star. The records of it, I believe, go into the Library of Congress, and where anything can be recorded. Like astronomers and astronomy in general does not recognize that Nori is a real star or Spiegel is a star. Okay? So you pay your $35 or $40, you get a little certificate that says, you're in the star system of Alpha Centauri, and your star is now designated as Nori.
And you get a little map or something.
Here's a little map that shows you where your star is.
And there you are.
And there you are.
How about the Star of Bethlehem? I wonder who's got that.
Ooh, wow. Maybe the new pope.
I still think that was a planet or something. What if it was a UFO?
Well, George, what if the cloud that followed the Israelites out of Egypt, was it a pillar of cloud by day and a bright cloud or a bright thing of fire by night to lead them toward the sea? If we're supposed to believe that stuff happened, then I try and rationalize, well, what was it that happened? What did these people see? What was it that was helping them? Was it God? I don't happen to think that it was God.
But there is a God. I believe that, don't you?
You know what? I don't know if I believe in a God figure or personality. How
about energy source?
I'm leaning toward energies. Yes,
but it's intelligent energy somehow.
Yes, exactly. I think
it knows what it's doing.
Is made of intelligent energies that is non-physical, and I personally think that this whole Big Bang theory was that some of these energies came together and decided collectively, let's be creative and let's do something. Bang, let's create physical stuff.
It's easier to think of a God.
I know.
A godlike figure. It really is. Because when you start thinking about everything else, you go nuts.
Oh, my head explodes when I start thinking about this stuff.
When I was a kid, and I thought about these questions, like, how did the universe start? Who's God? How did God start? And I couldn't come up with the answer, and I still don't have. You go nuts. You go nuts. Lee, stick with us. We're going to come back for a final half hour with you and phone calls right here on Coast to Coast AM. Well, it's time for our traditional shout-out. It's Friday night into Saturday morning. Those of you listening to Coast on our more than 560-plus radio stations across North America, hello. Coast Insiders, thank you for all you do. XM Talk Channel 168. And then the various chat rooms, Into Infinity, Fantastic Forum 2, Imaginative World, Sorcery, IRC, and those who follow us on Facebook and Twitter, Yahoo Chat, the SoCal UFO Meetup Group. How about the Hollywood Ghost Hunters and our buddy Greg the Cook in St. Louis? And welcome back. Lee, we are getting a lot of strange UFO reports and cases these days. Have you been trying to follow that?
Well, I do. And one of the tough things about it, George, is especially where people are reporting that they've taken videos and pictures, it gets really tough to weed through all the stuff that's on YouTube because of all of the, as your earlier caller, Gino, would like to say, the hoaxsters out there. It's so easy to Photoshop something and make it look real that it's difficult to know what is real and what isn't. Although I also agreed with Gino that most sightings going back decades, it's always been about 95% have been explained by conventional things and objects, and about 5% residue. And so when people are looking up into the skies at night and they see something that they don't understand, even if they say they saw a UFO, that they don't realize all the time that UFO is not the same thing as alien spacecraft. Our society, our culture has become used to designating a spaceship from another world as a UFO.
That's true.
And we have to be careful of that because people will tend to believe things more and more and more. And I just caution people that what they should do is, if they really think they've seen something extraordinary, they should report it to one of the databases like Peter Davenport's reporting center, because they want to put as much data together as they can to triangulate information and to see if other people had the same experiences. It's a good way of people kind of being part of the whole process of helping to investigate UFOs, rather than just seeing something and not telling anybody about it.
Okay, let's go back to the phones for you. We'll go to Sue in Chico, California. Hey, Sue.
Hello, Lee.
Hi, Sue.
I have a question for you, and you're tremendous, by the way. I'm one of these people that you might be interested in. I happen to be a blind person, and I was abducted. And I have also filed a report with NIDS, National Discovery Science, Bob Bigelow's thing when it happened. And I've got an implant in me and all of this, too. But I was wondering why these things happen to me, because I'm a blind person. And I actually heard that the aliens talk and the whole bit.
Well, I'm not sure, Sue, if being blind, or if somebody was deaf or couldn't walk, I don't know if that really has much meaning to whoever's doing this stuff. There could be other things about you that are just so unique and so special that just your specialness.
Yes, that's true. And I want to know, do you have your column on the Huffington Post? Is it in the edition of that newspaper that's on Newsline for the Blind? Because if not, it should be, and I want to read it.
Boy, that's an interesting concept. I don't know. Are you able to send emails to people?
No, I don't do computers at all.
Okay, because I wasn't sure. So
I have a new device that is computer accessible, but the internet scares me. I'm old-fashioned, I guess. I don't want my public stuff out there.
Well,
my private stuff out there.
How do you normally communicate if you're not using a computer, Sue?
Braille and cassette, because I'm a blind person.
All
and
right.
My telephone also. I can leave you that if you need it.
I would prefer to certainly get it off microphone. Maybe
yes.
Break. George, is there a way that?
Yeah, I'll put her on hold now, as a matter of fact, and Gina can get the phone number, and we'll get it to you.
Great, that's great, and I will definitely call you, Sue. Okay.
All right, let's go to Kathy in Los Angeles. Hey, Kathy, go ahead.
Hi, Kathy.
Kathy?
Earth to Kathy.
Kathy is no longer with us, but let's go east, where Andrew must be in Roanoke, Virginia. Go ahead, Andrew.
Hello.
Yeah, hi, Andrew.
Hi, Andrew.
Yeah, I have a few questions, but I guess the one that, when I tuned in earlier, you were talking about faster than light travel, and it's, I'm not a physicist. I don't know the particulars, but I believe I heard something about tachyons, a theoretical particle that the slowest they can go is the speed of light, and Einstein theorized gravity traveled at the speed of light, and so if there are other things out there, I mean, for example, the way an eagle can see a thermal updraft and we can't. Perhaps they have a device or whatever that enables them to see where these gravitational waves are, and they can perhaps ride the waves, so to speak. Or, and I hate to really hate to bring up science fiction and Star Trek, but the warp field around the ship that they use is not, it doesn't measure velocity. It warps space around the ship. The ship is stationary. A lot of people don't even think about that. So, what were your thoughts on that? And also about a protoverse, like when you were talking about the Big Bang Theory earlier.
Right.
We know that when some stars are large enough, when they nova, they create black holes. Shortly after the beginning of the Big Bang, I believe there may have been what I call a protoverse, and that each star was nearly the size of each galaxy. And that is why in the reverse, when each of them novaed, created a supermassive black hole at their center. That's why most galaxies contain a supermassive black hole at their center. Not all. It's like the reverse of the smaller stars when we call them big. But do you see where I'm going with this?
I do. You're trying to grasp the possibility, first of all, of how could any kind of interstellar travel be accomplished. If we're not going to be using fossil fuels and throw some gas into a tank and launch a ship. And what I was trying to say before, and then George also picked up on it too, that in order to go from like one star system to another, rather than spending generations to do it, and then when you come back home, everybody that you knew before is already dead and gone. Isn't it possible, isn't it conceivable that another culture, maybe other cultures, have just figured out how to use things like these tachyons that you mentioned, or the concept of wormholes and being able to hopscotch between different places without even having to go the speed of light? It's just a matter of what do you know based on the knowledge that you have, based on your technology. Everybody's so concerned about Einstein and the speed of light, and we can't possibly get to the speed of light. Well, my feeling is, why are we spending so much time being concerned about that when maybe that's not the way to do it? And again, I'm not a physicist either, Andrew. I'm not a scientist, but I'm trying to keep it simple to explain it to myself. And like Robert Kuntz, the physicist that George and I were talking about before, who's involved with the possible alien implant surgery, Kuntz told me a couple of days ago, he says that a lot of his physicist colleagues, are probably going to be angry when he says this, but he is absolutely convinced that there was no Big Bang in the first place. He said this is a radical way of thinking, but I'm convinced that there was no Big Bang because the universe is infinite. The universe has always been there. There was no past or present or future. And again, that's the kind of concept where, again, that makes my head explode when I try and grasp something like this. We can't grasp it. But here's a physicist who says there was no Big Bang. And so, again, new theories, new ideas will only come as we move forward. If there's going to be a future, if there is going to be a Star Trek future for planet Earth, then we have to figure out a way of getting there without destroying ourselves along the way.
Now, that's so true. Could the bang have occurred between a collision of two universes?
That's an interesting concept. Yeah, but were they physical universes or were they energetic, non-physical ones?
Good point. Maybe one, maybe both.
Right, maybe both. A little matter-antimatter collision.
We'll go to Sherry in Salt Lake City, first-time caller. Go ahead, Sherry.
Hi, George. Hi, Lee. It's nice to speak with you.
Hi, Sherry.
Hi. I'm always learning things from your show, so thank you very much.
Me too.
Me too.
I wanted to share with you, I went out in my yard. This is a week ago, Thursday night, so it was March 14th. It was about 8:30 p.m. here in Salt Lake City, Utah. And so I'm not on the East Coast or anything, but I went out into my yard, take my dog out, holding my 2-year-old grandson. I look up over into the east sky, probably what appeared, if it were on the ground, appeared to be maybe only 4 or 5 blocks from my home. And I see a darkened circular area that, of course, it's a night sky, but you can tell that it's darker than a night sky, this circular space. Outside of that space, I see several cone-shaped beings that are orange and red, the colors that you're talking about earlier today, and it's hovering. And I think, wow, that's interesting. And then it moves slightly, and then it hovered. And, of course, I'm moving along with it, kind of keeping up with it down in the yard, and I'm laughing at myself because here I have my grandson in my arms, but I'm so curious. It hovers, and then it moved again, and it hovered. My neighbor came out at that time to bring out the trash, started yakking at me, and I looked at her and I said, "You need to look over there." And she looked and she said, wow, that's really strange. And I said, yeah. She says, well, there's supposed to be a comet tonight. I said, no, comets don't hover. This thing's hovering and then moving slowly. Then it spit something out that looked like it fired something that was much smaller than the beams that were coming out of it. I'm going to report it on Peter's site. I didn't know about that until tonight.
Yes.
And then it hovered. It moved a little bit forward, and then it sped off to the east. And I haven't heard anybody talk about it here. I did write something into the news, the local news channel, but nobody. I posted a post on Facebook, and no one else saw it except me and my neighbor.
Wow, and so, like you said, it didn't appear in any news broadcasts or anything?
Nothing. And they didn't contact me back or anything like that. And I did a little bit of research. I didn't see any other UFO-type objects or spacecraft in my limited search that resembled what I did see.
You're in Salt Lake City, right?
I'm in Salt Lake City. I have Camp Williams to the south and Hill Air Force Base to the north.
Yeah, okay, because I was going to ask you if there were any military installations around.
Yes, 2 of them.
In recent times, like recent weeks or months, have there been any other sightings that you've heard about that are similar to what you saw?
About a year and a half ago. I just started listening to George a couple of years ago, and it was kind of comical because I thought, I've never really noticed anything in the sky. I'm going to start watching the sky more often. And shortly after that, I saw another object not quite as far east as this one was, but it also was, I'm getting chills just talking about it, so that resonates truth with me. But it was a dark circular, kind of almost like a blimp, and I can tell you that it had windows, yet I couldn't visually see any windows there, if that makes any sense. But I know that it had some square windows on it. And that was hovering not too far from my home. My sister's home is next door, and it was hovering just not too far from there. And every night when I pull in from work, I look up in that area to see if I ever see anything like that again. But other than that, I haven't heard anybody report anything. And like you were saying, Lee, I'm not a huge partier. We were talking about it at a family little girl's birthday party the other day, and we were all joking because I don't do drugs and I don't really drink. So
yeah. And Sherry, the most recent encounter or the thing you saw in the sky, if you are going to report it to Peter Davenport Center, you should definitely do it sooner than later before you forget any details about it.
Okay.
Definitely write down what you very vividly remember about it so that when you report it, you won't have to struggle to remember what the thing looked like.
Thank you, and I'm going to do that tomorrow.
Sure, great.
Okay, that's the way to do it. Thanks. Appreciate it. Will we ever bust through this story, Lee? Will you and I ever get these answers?
Well, I hope so, George. I asked Stan Friedman that question about a year ago. I said, Stan, none of us are getting any younger. Do you hope to solve and really come up with the answers and have people really believe all the things you've been talking about, while you're still alive? Do you ever think about that? And he said, well, I just can go on and do what I'm doing and hope that in my lifetime I'll get to see something. And because I used to wonder if Alan Hynek wondered the same thing, and he died too soon without ever having the final answers. And so, George, you and I are always kind of on a mission to find out, and I will keep talking to people. I'll keep writing stories about it. I'll keep looking into the skies and going to locations where I can actually see stars at night, and just doing what I can to try and keep it real and to keep it honest and credible for people. And if by some chance I'm helping to accomplish that and helping people to learn some stuff the way they learn from listening to your show, then that makes me a happy guy.
Let's see if we can squeeze in one more question for you. Yeah. Kim in Oxnard, California. Kim, only got about a minute. Go ahead.
Hi, George.
Hi.
Can you hear me okay?
Sure can.
Hi, Kim.
Okay, great. Hi, how are you?
Good.
Awesome show tonight, Lee. I could listen to you for hours.
Oh, thank you.
I have a really quick, funny story to tell you, and then 2 quick questions.
Well, won't have time for that, Kimmy, but go for it real fast.
Let me give you my questions then.
Go ahead.
I'm wanting to know if you know anything about this woman's an ancient body that was found on the moon, supposedly. If that's a real story or not. And also, you brought up the Navajo Rangers, and
right.
I'm wondering what if any do you know about the Archuleta Mesa base?
Less than a minute, Lee. Go ahead.
Well, I think if I'm not mistaken, this base. Oh, is this in Utah, or are you talking about Arizona?
Dothan, New Mexico.
Okay, I don't know much about that at all. And chances are that the Navajo Rangers, if there's anything weird about it or unexplained, that the Rangers themselves are onto it, and you can very easily check out the things that they're investigating by going to the Navajo Rangers website, where they list the current things that they're looking into, the different stories. And you can probably even type in that particular topic and see what's going on with the investigation.
Lee, always a pleasure, my friend. Keep in touch. You need anything, come track me down, okay?
Thank you, George. I appreciate it.
Lee Spiegel up next. Open lines plus the Rage hotline. Let me give you that number right now. Give you a head start. 818-817-0021. Not that you were the one who was raging, but what have you witnessed anywhere? A store, a highway? Talk about rage. Well, you ready for open lines? I am. Let's do it. Plus, I'm opening up the Rage hotline. Something that you've witnessed. Rage in a supermarket. Rage on the roads. Rage anywhere. I think it's everywhere. Check in with us at 818-817-0021. Don't forget, Skype is open. George97313. Try that out. Back in a moment with open lines on Coast to Coast AM. Okay, welcome back to Coast, and welcome back to our open lines. And got a full bank of calls here, so let us get going. Let's start with Sherry in Modesto, California, west of the Rockies. Hello, Sherry. Good morning.
Hi, George. It's been a while.
Sure has. Where have you been?
Oh, well, I couldn't get through a lot of times, and I wanted to many times.
That happens. What's going on?
Well, I was going to ask another question, but since your guest is gone, is there a way I can change what I want to say?
If I said no to you, then I'd upset you, and I'm not here to do that. So, of course.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, well, my husband is in the hospital for the second time in 3 weeks, and we need prayer for him.
Oh, my God. What's wrong?
His blood pressure is very low. He's got really bad diarrhea, an infection in his bowels, and they're... Well,
you don't have to be that graphic. That's okay.
Well, sorry about that, but anyway, just infection all through his body, and his blood pressure is like right now it's 90 over 60, but it got down to 70 over 50, and
whoa,
and he can't even have any visitors. He's not doing well enough.
How old is he?
So we really need prayer for him.
How old is he?
He'll be 70 in May.
That's still pretty young. All right, you got him. He's on the prayer list.
Okay,
what's his first name?
George.
Sherry, tell me his first name.
Leo.
Leo it is. On the prayer list. People pray on Fridays. Let's see what happens. Tommy's in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Welcome to the show. Hey, Tom, go ahead.
Hey, George, how you doing?
Okay, Tom.
I got to tell you, I think I'm one of the luckiest listeners. This is the second time I ever called, and the second time, and both times I got through to you.
You're batting 1,000.
It rang twice, and she answered, and I got on in 2 minutes. But,
that's great.
I want to talk to you about what do you think about the realm of dreams, because when I was younger and my grandfather died, and a couple of my friends, one of my friends committed suicide at a very young age, and they came. My grandfather and this person came to me in my dreams, and I told them, you're dead. I asked them, you're dead, and they said, yeah, I know, and they asked about the family, my grandfather, and we went back and forth, and it didn't feel like a dream. It felt like, you know, it was me and him in real life.
Yeah.
And then my other buddy that killed himself, I had a dream I'm in a bathroom and someone's kicking the door. And I started getting aggravated, and I opened the door real quick, and it was my friend Danny that killed himself, shot himself. And I said, Danny, what are you doing in my dream? And I said, you're dead. And he goes, I know. And he said, you don't even want to know how much stuff I had to do just to get this far.
You mean to get up to the point to communicate with you?
I guess so. Yeah.
Whoa.
You know,
what? Why do you think he killed himself, Tom?
He was crazy over a woman.
Oh.
And we were like 18, and some people think that the trigger slipped, but you know, ultimately, you know, he shot himself in the head.
Ugh. Even if he was joking, you don't play around like that. You know it?
No, I think he was really like, they had one of them really nasty relationships where they tested each other, you know, like in life or death situations.
Yeah.
And,
yeah.
You know, but I was wondering what your take was on dreams. And
well, I think dreams, Tom, are great places to communicate with the other side. Both ways, for you to them and for them to you. And obviously, he had some unfinished business. Did he ever come back again to tell you what was going on?
It was just a one-time thing, you know.
Maybe he needed that closure with you, just to see you.
Yeah, I mean, we weren't the best of friends. It was kind of like maybe he thought I was, you know, I was open, and he got my channel, I guess. I mean, you know, but we weren't like really good friends, but we definitely knew each other, you know.
And he was 18 when he did this?
Yeah, he was 18, and then my dream with him was about I was 20.
That is it.
Yeah,
okay, well, I would guess your dream state's the best way to communicate. You know, I've talked to a number of people who've been really close to trying to attempt suicide. And I try to convince them, and I'm not a doctor, I'm not a psychiatrist, and I'm not a psychologist, but that, you know what, no matter how black it might be right now and how dark your life might be, it'll get better. Can't get worse. The only exception I have to that is people who are in extreme pain and they're terminal. That's a tough one. That's where old Kevorkian came in. And I'm not so sure he was off base on that. You know, he did go to prison for a while for second-degree murder with his assisted suicides. But, you know, if you're in really extreme pain and you're terminal and there's no way out like that, well, what do? Let's go to Lisa. She's in Westminster, California. Hello, Lisa. Welcome to the program.
Hello, George. You know those plastic T-shirt bags that you get at the supermarket with your groceries?
Yep.
Well, they seem to be an endangered species.
They are.
Yeah, in Huntington Beach, they're going to vote at the next meeting, and they're probably going to vote to keep stores from giving you the bags. California Assemblyman Mark Levine has introduced AB 158, which would either ban the bags or make the store charge you 10 cents for them, which is ridiculous. They're maybe a penny if you buy them in bulk, but they're going to make the stores charge you 10 cents for them. If people live in California or someplace else that's considering this, please tell your legislator, don't do this. Or if you must do it, at least make an exception for biodegradable bags, which can be made from plants. For some reason, they're not even talking about biodegradable, but at least they should make an exception for those.
Yeah. Well, we used to have paper bags in my day, and everybody was able to go shopping.
Yeah, but the bags are big and bulky, and they tear if they get wet, and they have a
I've done that. Or
I don't know.
Or if they're too heavy and they don't double bag it, boom, everything falls.
The plastic bags, you can run your arm through a few bags and still have the use of both hands.
Oh, I know. It's much easier. But you got to be careful with these permanent cloth bags because they tend to retain disease, like salmonella and E. coli and all that stuff.
Yeah, exactly. And if you wash them after every use, they get all fuzzy looking, and who needs more housework? This is just too much hardship for working families. You hear conservative libertarian arguments against this, but there are also good populist progressive arguments against
Probably a scam just to make more money, isn't it?
It's something, but we've got to tell our legislators, don't do this, or if you must do it, at least make an exception for biodegradable plastic.
I agree with you. I mean, I like those bags. You're right. They're convenient. It's easy to carry. You can carry like 10 of them as a pack mule. You just keep moving. Put your arms through it, and off you go. Let's go to the Rage line. Lee is in Salem, Virginia. Welcome to the program. Hi, Lee. Go ahead.
Yeah, I've witnessed some rage, and I'll tell you, I've witnessed it in myself.
What happened?
And I'll tell you why. This medical system that we have is blowing my mind.
What's happening?
I have to have a heart transplant.
Okay.
And they've told me on 3 occasions that they're not going to give me one.
Why not?
Because I look fine.
Because you look fine?
Excuse me?
They say you're healthy?
They say I look fine. They know that my test results say my EF is at 10% and dropping. When you were saying earlier, it can't get worse. For me, it can.
You know what? I want to put you on hold. I want you to get a hold of our Christian Wild, our researcher. Would you be interested in stem cells? Let me tell you something, Lee. I'm not kidding you. I've had some people who called the show, and Christian got them into a program. There was one guy who could barely walk 5 steps without having to stop for 5 minutes and catch his breath. He's now jogging. They've injected them.
Sometimes.
Would you do it?
It's hard for me to walk distance, and there's a lot of things I can't even do with my little girl.
How old are you?
I'm 44.
Oh, yeah.
Or I will be in June if I make it that long.
I mean, would you consider going through a stem cell program?
I have never considered it, but I don't know that much about it.
I mean, it's better. It's better than where you are right now.
Which type of stem cells would they?
It's harvested from yourself, from your own body.
Okay. Because I wouldn't want them coming from
embryos,
the original source where they used to get them.
Yeah, no, these come from you. Let me put you on hold, and then we're going to get Christian your name. Let's see what happens.
Well, I would also like to point out one other thing.
Yeah.
Or actually 2, if I may. Now, everybody's talking about, these death panels that are going to start popping up here and there.
Mm-hmm.
They already exist, all right? So losing the illusions you may have that they're not there already deciding whether or not you get a transplant, because I've firsthand knowledge of that. And secondly, they're talking about the rising cost of health care and this and that. Let me tell you why. I want to tell the world why it costs so much to go to the doctor. All right, my wife, she has kidney stones. She's had 30 lithotripsies. 30 lithotripsies.
What's that mean? What's a lithotripsy?
That's where they sonically blast.
Oh, that's the ultrasound bombardment? Okay, all right.
And she's had 30 of those procedures. But when she has to call her doctor, the only number that she has for him gets transferred through 2 operators before it gets transferred to an answering machine. So they have to pay these 2 operators where they could have just went straight to the answering machine. That's why medical care is so expensive, because they've got too many people sitting around doing nothing.
How much are you? By the way, are you on a list for a heart?
No, they won't put me on the
you're
list.
Not even on. Yeah, you definitely need to talk to
because
Christian.
I look fine.
How much has this all cost?
Every time they said that to me 3 times on 3 separate occasions, it enraged me, but I kept my cool because I didn't want to blow my chances.
I understand. Do you have insurance?
Right now, I'm at a point where I'm just, sick of hearing about, that the you look fine thing.
Well, okay. Well, we're going to try to get you, or at least we'll have Christian look at it. He won't say you look fine, but he'll take your records and he'll get them off to the right people. He'll see if you qualify for stem cells. You just about regrow a heart. Let's go to Tim, first-time caller in St. Louis. Hey, Timmy.
Hey, how's it going?
Good. Is it cardinal fever out there yet?
Oh, just a little bit. It's going good. Thing I got is, George, is, you know, I watch television. I watch the news all the time. I listen to the news. And by the end of the program or 3/4 way through, they're like saying, go to so-and-so.com and get the rest of the story. You know? And I'm like, I ain't got a computer. I don't want my stuff out there. I never have, never will. I'm old school, and I never get the rest of the story.
They give you like a little headline now, and boy, in my days, we would do the whole story. We'd complete it and move on to the next one.
Yeah, that's how it used to be. But now it's all about, you know, go to so-and-so.com and get the rest of the story, and I ain't got a computer, and I'm like, I'm lost. I'm like, I got half the story. But that's all I got. I mean,
all right.
Just, you know, they could give us the rest of the story for people that ain't got a computer.
They should do the whole story. I agree with that. We'll go to Denver. Chris is with us on the wild card line. Hey, Chris, go ahead.
I know it's wild card line, George, but I have to admit I'm a first-time caller, long-time listener.
That is okay. Any line's good when you do that.
850 KOA out here in Denver, all the way back to Art Bell days. Hey, yeah. Art, just wanted to say as a Marine Corps veteran right off the bat, I wanted to say thank you for your dedication to all of us during the holidays, in particular when you're always with us during those times. Just coming out of one of those times, and I got to say, I knew I could always count on you.
Thank you,
like
Chris.
a lighthouse out there. So thank you, George.
You're welcome. And more to come. We've got all the holidays are right in the middle of the week, so it'll be my duty again.
Well, I appreciate it. And, you know, on those nights, it's hard to get through. So just a little quick reminder in at this time of year that it still pays off. So thank you. Hey, George, do you think we'll ever catch the Zodiac?
The Zodiac Killer?
Yes.
I don't know. That's a good question. We've come close. As a matter of fact, I got a call a few months ago from someone. Sounded like he was the Zodiac Killer, but it wasn't.
I think it would be fun to revisit that again. I love when you do those shows, maybe do a call-in line, that kind of thing.
Okay, good idea. Good idea.
Thank you, George, again.
A lot of theories about the Zodiac Killer. And by the way, our theory, as we did it 10 years ago when I first started doing Coast to Coast, was to be live on holidays. You know, no canned programs, no tapes on those important days. Because a lot of people look at this program as family to them. And a lot of people don't have family. They don't have the ability to celebrate Christmas and Thanksgiving and New Year's. So, you know, I came in and I said, first of all, if a holiday is on a Monday through Friday where I work, we're going live with it. And the staff comes in. They're all dedicated people. How many Christmases have you worked with me, Dan? Lots of them. And Thanksgivings and everything else. And he's got a family. He's got 2 little kids and everything else. We're dedicated to this for you. And that's what we do. And weekends, I've told George Knapp, John Wells, and Ian that if the holidays fall on the weekends, folks, you're going to be live or I'll come in and do it. And they've been very gracious to do that, too. That is so important to what we do and the programming that we do. And that's what we're going to do until the end of time. And we will keep doing that for you. So it's our honor to be able to do that for you. We go next to Clarksburg, West Virginia. It's Carrie's turn on Coast to Coast. Hi, Carrie.
Hello, how are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm good. I'm calling because you were talking about UFOs and lights and things like that.
Yeah.
And I'm originally from Parkersburg, which is along the Ohio River, and there are some people that have been seeing lights going up and down the Ohio River since 1980s. These people are very educated, very intelligent. They're not dumb by any means, but now they're retired, and they sit down there every summer night, and I got to meet them, and I said, I said, hey, guys, you see any lights tonight? And they'd say, yeah, we see them every night. And when I talked to them about it, they say that they have reported it, but they were told that they were weather balloons. They said, we know the difference between a weather balloon. I mean, some of these guys are engineers.
Yeah, exactly.
And so one evening I was sitting down there, and I was sitting in my car, actually, but I was able to talk to them because they were, sitting close. And it was just real quiet, and I looked up, and I saw it looked more like a hologram, and it was next to the bridge. And I said to myself, I couldn't believe what I was seeing, and I didn't want to tell anybody what I was seeing, but I put my head out the window to make sure I wasn't seeing any reflection on the glass, and I looked behind me to see if it was anything projected from that direction over toward the bridge. But it looked like a UFO, but it was very faint. It looked like a hologram.
Did it move?
No, it didn't move.
It just stood there. You know what? I've been convinced, the Project Bluebeam is a case where there's supposed to be a false UFO flag using holograms. I wonder if there's somebody out there testing them where you are, West Virginia, not too far from the Capitol, right? In Washington, D.C., not that far. We'll be back. More open lines on Coast to Coast AM. Well, on our Saturday Coast to Coast program, can Fukushima happen here? John B. Wells will take a look at that story. Then on Sunday, George Knapp will be chatting with film director Sean Stone about his work with Jesse+Ventura on conspiracy theory, and also about his film that he discusses, Greystone Park, about demons and strange things along the eastern seaboard. In a moment, I'll be back with final open line calls, and don't forget the Rage line on Coast to Coast AM. And you don't hear the voice of Tom today with your texts because Tom has got the day off, and I think he took the text phone with him. So we won't have that tonight. Let's go back to the phones. How about the Rage line? Lewis in Yuma, Arizona. Get us going here. Lewis, go ahead.
Well, how you doing, George?
Good, Lewis. How about you?
Doing pretty good. This is when I was. This was the weirdest thing. When I was stationed in Germany in the Air Force, I did a brief stint in Saragossa, Spain. And we got into a bar, and at that time I just had turned 18, and so I got into a bar, pretty excited and all that. These guys come in, I could tell some bad stuff was going to happen, and it was a real big bloody fight between these Spaniards and what the tarnation's going on. Well, my sergeant sort of explained to me a little bit, which got me into history, but he said that's because there you got the northern part of Spain that's still kind of pissed off at the south, being 30 miles across the Strait of Gibraltar from the northern Africa, where the Muslims had come in and took over their country. They were fought off by El Cid till 1240 A.D., and then he passed away. He was a great warrior. And they were still upset. Afterwards, they took over, came in and took all the churches, turned them into mosques. Kind of it gets me because I'm over in Yuma, Arizona. We're 10 minutes from Mexico. A lot of good people down there in Mexico. Yep. But there's a rash of killings and people being beheaded and what have you. And I started thinking, there was an assassination attempt on an ambassador in Washington, D.C., so it was carried out by the drug lords and the radical Islam. And it was they busted the guy. The guy was he was a car dealer over there in El Paso. But that was about the worst rage I've ever experienced.
Well, let me ask you something, Lewis. Why were you enraged by them, or are you just?
There's more to be enraged by. It's not just that. There's a lot of things that come into play. Take for instance, if you read the 9/11 Commission report, pages 110, 111. Yeah. The Sudan offered Saddam to Clinton. That was in 1996. He said he hoped that the Saudis would take him and do something with him. Now, nobody wanted him. Well, he said he didn't do it, but then if you read pages 480, it mentions of the 9/11 Commission report. It mentions a tape CIA tape where Clinton admits that he let Osama walk. So how many trillions have we spent between 1996 and now?
Can't count it. Can't count it. Too much.
Okay. So I'm pretty enraged.
That you should be enraged about. Let's go to our Skype line, Chantel in my old hometown of Detroit. Hi, Chantel.
Hi, George. It's so good to talk to you again. How are you?
Good. How's Detroit doing?
Cold.
My gosh. I mean, they've got...
Still waiting for spring.
They've appointed a new person to run the business affairs there. It's falling apart.
Hey, unfortunately, yes, it is, and it's breaking my heart. But it's this falls in line with the rage line. I just believe what will be, and everything happens for a reason. So, and that's the reason I'm calling tonight. It's so odd because I was in a location where I couldn't listen to your show. And I had really bad internet connection. So I've been away from you for about 2 years, George, and this is my first night back.
You must have had withdrawals. You have to come back.
I have to. I remember talking to you when I was in the hospital with a stroke in 2004, and you were so kind to me. And then you did a blurb for my book. I'm international now with my book. So I just adore you, George, and I just can't thank you enough for things that you've done for me in my life.
You're welcome.
But really quick about the rage, because I'm noticing a huge trend regarding people are just angry right now.
Yes, with everything.
The simplest thing sets people off. And as an angel medium and as a professional angelologist, I study the lore of angels. I communicate with angels every day, as you might communicate with your family. They are my family to me. And I had a moment of rage to the point where I felt I even had to apologize, even though no one knew about it really. It was just between me and one other person. I had to publicly apologize to my Facebook followers because I felt I had let them down as a teacher and as an author. And basically, long story short, I had a project that I'd been working on since October, and the person knew about that project. And right up until we were about to begin, literally 2 weeks, I emailed the person on Saturday. 2 weeks before we were about to begin, on Monday, I got a long-winded excuse. Oh, I'm not interested. I'm not doing this anymore. And I allowed this person to pull me down
into the dark side. Yep.
And I'm a person, I study, I'm double certified Reiki. I'm an ordained minister. And I couldn't believe that it was just so easy to be pulled down. I kind of felt that maybe I had gotten past that. But the funny part about the story is, very quickly, that Saturday night before I went to sleep, Archangel Michael had come to me. He said, look, kid, I've got this book project I want you to really work on. I said, Michael, I got to finish this one project first and make a deal with you. Get this little project out of the way for me. Help me get it out of the way. And then after this project's done, I'm all yours. I'm all ears. You've got me for the rest of the year if you want. And that's exactly what he did. On Monday, everything exploded. I lost everybody that was supposed to be a part of the project. And it was the most trivial thing. And that's what angered me the most, because I consider myself a very professional person. And I was stuck in the middle of a situation that only 15-year-olds
would be. That's right. I bet you kicked yourself for that.
Well, then it turned into a vicious cycle of me being angry at myself for being angry.
Oh, yeah, that happens.
So what I want to put out to your audience is rage is fear. It's when we fear that we can't control a situation around us. And what we need to do is what Archangel Michael has taught me. First, we need to pull back and breathe. and ask ourselves, what is the lesson that we're to learn when something doesn't go our way? And then it's just like I posted on my Facebook today. Archangel Michael says, sometimes things have to go really, really wrong before they really go right. And once I started his project, his mind project exploded in my face, I said, well, what the heck? I've got nothing else to lose. I might as well work on his project, which was what I'm doing tonight while talking to you. I started his project, and 2 days later, an artist came out of the blue, and I wound up with a brand new team that I wasn't even looking for.
See? That's how it happens. I'm going to take a few more calls, Chantel, before we have to say goodnight. But that's how it happens. When you least expect it, when you throw out the good energy, these things just flow to you. It's happened to me time and time again. It really does. Jeremy's in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, east of the Rockies. Hey, Jeremy, thanks for calling.
Thanks for taking my call, George. I wanted to talk to you about the recent events with President going overseas and getting his medal and having all of these promises being made to the leaders over there. And it seems to me a lot like the same posturing that happened before the Iraqi war. And it seems like they're trying to justify preemptive war. And I hope the American people don't stand for it. I'd like to know what you think.
Where do you think this preemptive war could be? Iran or North Korea? It's going to be one or the other.
Well, I mean, it's probably going to be both.
Yeah, but one of them's going to be first, I would think. And hopefully they want to draw the other one in.
I would assume that this is,
the fact that he was in Israel,
much bigger.
It could be Iran. Let me tell you a story, too. Today, my Iranian source came to me and said that the supreme leader, who I always thought hated us, he said that today on Iranian television, which we wouldn't know about, Khomeini was talking about how he wants to be friends with America and everything else. And they said this was dramatic. People in Iran were talking about how this was an icebreaker. And they were all excited about it. We haven't heard about that here yet. But that's going to be very interesting to see how that unfolds. But in terms of drumming up support for a war, look, when things are strange, when the economies are jumbled, and they are worldwide, something's going to happen. My gut says that. I mean, we have felt for how many years now, 2 years, that this very strange feeling was going to, something looming over us. Maybe that's it. Next up, let's go to Billy in Eureka, California. Hey, Billy, it's your turn. Welcome to the program, and there you go.
Yeah, I wanted to call in because I heard a while ago you said that you had never heard of any shadow persons being violent.
Right, right.
About 5 years ago, I'd say I was living with my parents still, and I was laying in bed, and I had this shadow figure standing over me, choking me. And I felt like I couldn't move, and then I finally got up, and I asked, what are you doing this for? And then all of a sudden it was like I was laying in bed, and, nothing had happened. But I don't think it was a dream because it was just so real at the time. It had to have been a shadow person.
Did it have, but if it was physical, how did it choke you? I mean, shadow people are shadows.
That's what I always figured, but I don't know what else it could have been. It was so real at the time. I don't think it was a dream or anything because I just seen him standing over me, and I couldn't breathe.
Well, one day we'll do a show on shadow people and whether people have been hurt or injured or attacked by them. I'm not so sure that was a shadow person, but you know what? We'll take more calls on that. Let's go next to our rage line. Bobby's with us. Welcome to the program. And where are you calling from, Bobby?
Columbus, Ohio.
All right. Thanks. I'm going to be there, by the way, sometime in May at an event. So look at our website and come on out.
Yeah. I was actually going to check the website. I think I heard you mention it yesterday, and I was like, oh, cool.
Yeah, it's going to be fun.
The last time I talked to you, George, it was actually by accident because my husband was sick right when he went to go get on the phone. And so I just started talking to you till he got there.
Okay,
so
I remember that.
I actually get to talk to you myself. I like it.
Perfect. I've got a minute for you. That's all.
Well, I was calling because I talked to the screener, and she wanted like a rageful incident, and I could not believe what I was seeing. Normally in Columbus, Ohio, you don't see a whole lot of much of nothing. Like literally, I'm in the capital city. I hear roosters crowing right now. And, so we're not a whole lot of much of nothing over here. But usually with road rage incidences, typically here, I don't know where they are, how they are other places, but you're going too fast, and it's on, like, the freeway, and they just kind of, like, play chicken with their cars.
Oh, it's unbelievable. You know what? I saw that today. It's funny you bring that up, Bobby. I'm convinced that the rager is the person who is either cut off or there's a slow person in front of them or something happens and they go ballistic. It's not the aggressive driver. I mean, the person who's weaving in and out of traffic and stuff is just doing their thing. They're just bad drivers. But the rager is the person who has that done to them. Somebody cuts in front of you or something. They go ballistic.
Well, I never knew I had Martians in my garden. And I never knew there were aliens on my roof. I got shadow people, and they're living in my basement. Got a funny feeling Bigfoot's gonna be here soon. I was so blind before, I was so unaware. But now I swear I'm seeing Sasquatch over there. I turned on my radio in the middle of the night, and I heard things I need to know. Now I can see the light, and I also see a ghost, 'cause I'm listening to Coast to Coast. Well, you never knew that your baby was a hybrid, but as he grew, you began to see the clues. Now you know the signs, 'cause you learned it from George Norrie. Even while you sleep, you got Martians watching you. I turned on my radio in the middle of the night, and I heard things I need to know. And I can see the light, and I also see a ghost, 'cause I'm listening to Coast to Coast. Good morning or good evening, wherever you may be, whichever world you're living in, whatever century, your voice is always welcome here on my radio. Call in with your space transmitter or your telephone. And I turned on my radio in the middle of the night, and I heard things I need to know. Now I can see the light, and I also see a ghost, 'cause I'm listening to Coast to Coast. 'Cause I'm listening to Coast to Coast.
For Dan Galante, Gina Salvati, Tom Danheiser, Lisa Lyon, Alex Lonehood, Sean Ladassour, Chris Boros, Stephanie Smith, George Knapp, John B. Wells, Ian Punnett, and Art Bell. I'm George Norrie, somewhere out there on Coast to Coast AM. We'll see you on our next edition. Until then, be safe, everyone. And our guest this hour, Lee Spiegel, will have open lines next hour. We'll take your phone calls with Lee when we come right back on Coast to Coast AM. And welcome back, Lee Spiegel with us. Lee, have you done a story yet on Planet X?
No, I haven't. I'm not sure what I think about that yet. I don't know if there's actually definitive proof that there is a Planet X. I think the jury is still out on that, George.
You know, you would have been, I think, just in high heaven if you had a chance to have interviewed Zechariah Sitchin. Of course, he's dead.
I did.
Now. Oh, you did?
You know what? I interviewed Zechariah several times when I was hosting my own talk show on NBC Radio called The Edge of Reality back in the late 70s, early 80s. And Zechariah, because he lived in New York, and he would come on. I think it was right after he wrote The 10th Planet.
That's right. The 12th Planet.
The 12th Planet, I'm sorry. and then he came on my show. I liked him instantly. What an amazing scholar! You used to get that impression from him that this man, talk about a great researcher. He knew his stuff, and yet a lot of the skeptical world, kept throwing out that giggle factor. And I always enjoyed talking with him.
Well, knowing that you talk to him, you might be able to resurrect enough information in your mind to do a Planet X story based on Sitchin's work.
Well, I'm glad you told me that, because that's an interesting possibility. Well, thank you for the...
Yeah, I mean, regardless of his theory of the Annunaki coming here, wanting to mine for gold, but I think the theory of humankind being genetically altered is very possible.
Oh, yes. I actually have believed that for a long time as well. Too many stories by too many people like good old people like Ezekiel, okay? Going back to the days of the Bible where there are stories that were supposed to take at face value of creatures that came down from the skies and mingled with our women folk, or did some other experiments to kind of help move the human race in a certain direction. Aren't we supposed to believe what's in the Bible? I always thought so.
Yeah.
And so, sure, I can kind of believe that something happened to help our evolution along a little bit. But it's, when I'm writing stories, I have this self-imposed rule of trying to stay kind of neutral, because I know...
Well, that's the way to do it.
Yeah, because I don't want to lead people in the wrong direction if they don't want to go there.
Yeah, I try to do that on this program, same way.
Yeah, and you do it. You're the best.
Let's go to east of the Rockies. Mike in Birmingham, Alabama. You're on with Lee Spiegel. Go ahead, Mike.
Hey, how are you doing, Lee and George?
Hi, Mike. How you doing?
I'm doing just well tonight. I just had a question about the Travis Walton abduction case.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And it really intrigued me a lot, and I remember when that movie came out. And
Fire in the Sky.
That's right.
Yeah, right. And there wasn't, to me, that many movies that dealt with, UFOs. And was just wondering how real, or how, I guess, how true the movie was.
Well, let me tell you something. I had a chance, Lee, to talk with Travis Walton several months ago at a conference. And
I was with him.
That's right.
3 weeks ago.
And he's been on the program. He's a great guy. And
yes,
he passed, and so did all the other loggers with him.
Yep.
Lie detector test. But go ahead. I'll let you react to his question.
Well, no, and you're absolutely right. When it's tough to form judgments on people who've made amazing claims like Travis Walton and the other and his colleagues, the other loggers. But when you actually get a chance to meet these people and talk with them, you get a real sense that there's no bull going on here. Travis is a very mild-mannered, very honest guy who didn't go out looking for this to happen to him.
No, not at all.
Yeah, and like you said, they all passed lie detector tests, and Travis basically, when they went, he was struck by a beam of light that came out of this craft that was in the forest, and his friends thought he was dead, and so they got into their truck and they got out of there, and when they came back a while later, Travis was gone, and he was missing for like 4 or 5 days.
And then they thought he wandered away or something.
Right. And
by the way, nice friends, right? They think he's dead, and they take off.
I know, but two of them, I forget which guys are doing this. Two of them have actually gone on some speaking tours with Travis in the last year.
Yeah.
To support him and back up the story. Yeah.
Well, there's no question. It's a great story.
Yeah, and like I said, I was with Travis just a few weeks ago. A very lovely man, totally unassuming. I like him a lot.
Something happened out there.
Yeah.
Something happened. Zapped him, knocked him out. So I think the fact that they passed the lie detector tests is very important. I was told once, do you remember, obviously you do, the Betty and Barney Hill abduction case was really the first publicized case.
It was. Where I went to college, George, was just a few miles south of the abduction site.
Wow.
I grew up in New Hampshire, and I went to Plymouth State College at the foot of the White Mountains, right there near Indian Head, where it all took place.
Well, the psychiatrist out of Boston was Dr. Benjamin Simon. He's dead now. I'm still looking for my tapes of him because he was one of my second interviews after Stanton Friedman.
That's right.
And what he told me specifically, I was 21 or 22 years old. You know, we're recording him on the telephone, and you know, I asked him about that case, and he said they believe they are telling the truth. I do not believe they were lying. I believe whatever happened to them, they actually believe that's what happened to them. And that, to me, is one of the most compelling things I've ever heard.
Yes. And he always maintained that. He was very good about that, which I was going to say he was very clever, but it's not really being clever. He's just being truthful and honest.
Yeah.
That he basically said he did not think they were making this stuff up.
Right. He said, I don't know what happened to them. I don't know if they got abducted by aliens, but they believe they did, and they're telling the truth.
You know, a little side note story to the whole Betty and Barney Hill thing. When I was working on putting my UFO record together in 1975, and I had interviewed Betty about it, I decided to do a little bit more checking, and I went to the National Archives in Washington, and I was just digging around, and I was doing some searches long before there was a thing called Google, so you had to really kind of go through microfilms and stuff. And I did a search for, I searched for the date. So I think it was September 21st, 1961, when the alleged encounter took place. And I found in the archives there was a report from the local Air Force base, Pease Air Force Base out of Portsmouth, New Hampshire, where Betty and Barney lived. And on the night of their experience, the Air Force Base had recorded and tracked a UFO on radar in the White Mountains when it arrived, and they tracked it when it left. And I grabbed a copy of that radar report and they let me make Xerox copies of it. And I always thought that was an important piece of evidence because, well, here it is. They have this story. They claim this happened to them, and it's corroborating evidence of some sort.
Yes, fascinating. Getting back to Sitchin for just a moment, and we'll go back to more calls late. In his research, the first human being, the genetically altered human, was called the Adam. And isn't it interesting? The Bible calls him Adam.
Adam, yeah.
I mean, there's something there. There's something there.
I think you're right, and you've just reawakened my interest now in Zechariah.
Good. That'll be a good one for you. Let's go to Dayton, Ohio. Duke is with us. Hey, Duke, welcome to the show.
Hi, Duke.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I had an interesting occurrence today. Let me start off by telling you that I'm an aerospace engineer, 35 years experience. There's not a whole lot you could put in the sky that I can't identify as long as it's something, something usual or identifiable. But today I was heading east out of Dayton, was maybe 10, 12 miles out of Dayton, within a couple miles of a small municipal airport and maybe 10 miles from right pad.
What time was this, Duke?
This was about 1:30 in the afternoon.
Okay.
High blue sky, 40 degrees, give or take. Beautiful day, no wind, driving due east. And as I'm driving, this is on a 4-lane highway, I see a shadow go across my car, coming from behind me, going over my car, heading kind of southeast. So, instantly, inherently, I look up through my sunroof, figuring it's a small light aviation aircraft going to land at this municipal airport. Well, there's nothing there. So I look forward. There's nothing there. I look all around. There's nothing there. There are no aircraft. I certainly didn't hear any aircraft. There were no large birds. We have a lot of hawks and turkey buzzards, things like that around. No birds. And as I say, a high blue sky. Absolutely nothing in the air anywhere around me. I'm in a car with a sunroof. I immediately look up, nothing above me. I do, as close as I can to a 360-degree sweep, around me looking to see what's out there. Nothing. But the shadow that went over me, I was doing probably 60, 65. So the shadow went over me and by me, progressing in my general direction. And the shadow had a definitive shape. I would call it kind of a tapered shape, thinner at the front and getting wider in the back, kind of delta shaped. But absolutely nothing in the air. It was the damnedest thing I've ever seen. I've never seen anything like that.
Wow. Did you think to look up at the actual sun? Because sometimes airplanes that are very high up and pass across the sun will cast a shadow on the ground.
Absolutely. Yeah, as I say, I'm familiar with all this. There was nothing in the air.
Wow.
Absolutely nothing. And this aircraft would have had for the shadow to go over me the way it did. The aircraft would have been going in the same general direction I was going. Now, again, it was a little after 1, so the sun was almost directly overhead. Just a little further west, as it was, traveling west. Not quite midday, so the sun was just a little bit behind me. But again, I'm looking straight up into, through a sunroof. Nothing there. And the reason, my first thought was, well, it must have been a bird or something. I didn't give it a lot of thought until I look around and notice there literally is no birds, no clouds, no aircraft, no nothing. And George, I think back to those times I've heard Linda Moulton Howe tell the stories of people who claim they see UFOs at night that tend to blend in with the night sky.
Right. That's absolutely true. And they have their little stars underneath the lights that look like stars.
Right. So I'm thinking to myself, and I'm sure both you guys know that, it goes back to even into World War I, where aircraft would be painted with an underside color to give it the ability to match the sky color wherever they were flying. Whether it's like in Europe, they usually painted up gray because of the gray clouds and all that, or gray overcast. So my first thought was, is it possible that something's flown over that is some black program that is, and I hate using the term cloaking because it comes out of a science fiction TV show from 40 years ago, but something like that is the only thing I can think of, because I'll promise you there was nothing up there that I can see.
Well, I have a question. Since you said you were near Dayton, is there any part of Wright-Patt Air Force Base that's still in use these days by the government?
Oh, sure.
So is it possible that there could have been some kind of test going on out of Wright-Patterson that, of course, they wouldn't have announced ahead of time?
Well, you never say never, but I mean, the thing about Wright-Patt that people don't understand unless they live here is that the runways coming out of Wright-Patt are very, very accessible to the public. So unless this was something that is totally invisible, as in invisible, any airplane taking off or landing at Wright-Patt, you go over several small towns and the end of the runway, no matter which way they're taking off or landing as a function of the wind, either end of the runway, there's always people sitting out there taking pictures and, looking at the airplane. So could it have been something flying out of Wright-Patt? Sure, it could have. Do I think it was? Nah, probably not. Just especially if it's some kind of black, kind of black program. You don't fly things like that out of towns with exposed runways.
That's a good point. Lee, years ago, while I was on the air in St. Louis, we had the case of this triangular-shaped UFO near Millstadt, Illinois, chased by some police officers. And these guys were convinced whatever they were chasing was not of this world. I mean, it was huge. Well, and it had that cloaking device, much like we were just talking about.
Yeah. Well, and every time I hear a story like this, George, it immediately brings me back to the day that Dr. J. Allen Hynek called me in 1975 and asked me to go down to Lumberton, North Carolina, and to check out a series of UFO reports that were coming into him by law enforcement officers, and he asked me to investigate it. And I asked him, I said, well, what are they reporting? Because I wanted to see a flying saucer. I had always wanted to see a disc. And he said, well, it's some new thing that they're reporting. It's like a triangular-shaped object, and we haven't heard about that before. Again, this was 75. And I said, so you're going to send me down there to see a flying triangle or a Dorito? He said, well, it's the best I can do. That's what they're telling me. And I went down there, and within a few hours of my arrival, I was standing in front of a field with 7 police officers and there's 6 shooters, and this craft was hovering above us, and it shot a beam of light down onto us. And I just gave you the abbreviated version of the encounter.
You know, I'm sure, Lee, years ago, some of the UFOs that people reportedly saw might have been the testing of drones. What do you think?
Why not? Sure, and it's possible they could have been delta-shaped or boomerang-shaped or triangular-shaped. I don't have a problem with that. I think the only thing that angered me back then and still angers me is that when people dare to speak out and report something that they experience, the officials are always quick to ridicule them. You know, we didn't have anything in the sky that night,
right?
Or we were dropping flares, so you must have seen flares floating. That always angers me because you can't, you know, you just can't do this to honest citizens who want to report something that they experience.
I'd love to see a government official say, "We don't know what it was. It wasn't ours."
Yeah, exactly.
You know what?
Just tell us you don't know.
Yeah, simple as that. But I wonder if they do know, and they just don't want to tell us.
Well, I'm sure that if they do know, they've got their reasons, and I know people are going to hate to hear me say that, but I do believe that's true.
I want to talk with you about disclosure, Lee, when we come back in a moment. Plus, we'll take more phone calls right here on Coast to Coast AM with our special guest, Lee Spiegel, right here on Coast to Coast AM. Well, how would you like to see Lee Spiegel on our television show Beyond Belief? I think we'll invite him. You can watch that program, by the way, 10 days free. Simply go to our website, click hosts, and the TV icon opens up. It's also one of our featured stories today. You'll really enjoy the program. We're having a lot of fun doing that, taping them in Denver, Colorado before a live audience. And the audience there, absolutely superb, primarily from that area. But if you're going to be in the Denver area, just pick up the email address that you'll find at coasttocoastam.com when you look at the Beyond Belief link, and send Tom a email, and he puts together the list of people. Love to have you in the studio audience. But take advantage of the 10 days free, if you would. Disclosure. People like Stephen Bassett, Stephen Greer, they're pushing for it. Do you think governments will ever just tell us what's going on, Lee?
No, I really don't.
Me either.
And you know, I met up with Steve Bassett in Arizona a few weeks ago, and he's hoping that I can come down to Washington at the end of April to be part of his citizen hearing on disclosure. He's planning this big event.
Oh yeah, he sure is.
And he's trying to get something like 40 or 45 researchers and former military witnesses to actually testify for, I think it's like 30 hours over 5 days in front of former members of Congress. And the whole thing is going to be, I think they're going to stream it live on the internet. It's going to be a big deal as long as he can get the kind of people that he's hoping to, and he's offered to let me have access to a lot of these people to put some stories together. So I've already mentioned it to my editor, and I said I may need to go down to Washington and cover this.
It's a huge story. Huge story.
And you know, a lot of these things have happened before at the National Press Club in Washington, because it's a good place to hold something like this. And there have been several things like this, and Stephen's been involved with them before, where former military people have come forward and in a very serious environment have said, look, we've been involved with UFO encounters, whether at military bases or missile silos where UFOs came around, and while they were there, all of our controls were knocked out. I mean, these people have come forward and have been very serious about it. So yeah, I applaud the effort of anyone doing this, and I hope Stephen can really pull this off.
I hope so, too.
Yeah.
He's been working at it for so many years, Lee.
I know. I know. He came running up to me a couple of times in Arizona saying, "So what do you think? Do you think you can be there?" I said, I'm working on it, Stephen. You know, I mean, it's not that far from New York to Washington, so it's a quick Amtrak ride down. I think we can probably pull it off.
Absolutely. So tell me about this story on algae on a meteorite.
Oh, boy, the algae on the meteorite. That's like interesting story. It actually it broke. The story broke in December, right after a meteorite fell in Sri Lanka. And the scientists quickly were able to get pieces of what they said was a meteorite, and they started looking at very closely using scanning electron microscopes. And their initial reaction was that there might be actual fossils, some kind of algae, biological fossils embedded in the matrix of the meteorite. Well, if that's true, then that's like an amazing find, and it would kind of bolster the theory that's known as panspermia. That's like the new word of the day for a lot of people. Panspermia is a concept that says life may be getting spread throughout the universe by the help of comets or meteorites. And there's some scientists who think that may be how life began on Earth, with the arrival of comets and meteorites that had some kind of algae embedded into them. So there's a whole team of scientists led by an astrobiologist named Chandra Wickramasinghe, and what they did, as I said, using the scanning electron microscopes, they felt that they found images that showed very tiny fossilized forms of algae, and the pictures are amazing. I did a couple of stories about this already, and the microscopic pictures, I mean, it looks like something out of a science fiction movie, quite honestly. And the skepticism that has surrounded this, because of course there are people that are going to say, well, there's really nothing to this.
Sure. Or contamination, something.
Yeah, they've actually argued that if it was a meteorite, that when it hit the Earth, that it could have been contaminated by things in the ground around it.
That's right. Yeah.
Okay, and then someone else said, well, there's a possibility that maybe the rock was not a meteorite, but it was an Earth rock, and it might have been struck by lightning, which could have caused unusual changes in its matrix. So,
well, another interesting possibility, I guess.
Yeah, I know. It's like the story is still evolving. It hasn't closed, and we'll see how this leads.
Let's take some more calls west of the Rockies. Paul is in Seattle. You're on with us, Paul. Go ahead.
Hi, George.
Hi, Paul.
Hi, Mr. Siegel.
No, call me Lee, Paul.
Okay, Lee. Thank you. I'll make this quick, George. I'm kind of with you, George. On I'm not too sure what they're about, but I want to ask Mr. Siegel, where do you get the most reports of the most UFO sightings? And I want to leave a comment because I think it has to do with what you guys were talking about, the government and their acknowledgement of the UFOs. But I'll just say it, and I don't care. I have a cousin. Oh God, I have a family member who's in the government, and I had told you this early last year, that he never believed in UFOs, but he said that he can't tell his dad everything, but what I can tell you is that when I retire, I'm moving to a cave and putting tinfoil on my head. And so that we've had the military experts, and like you said, I've got all the films of Gordon Cooper. They are out there, and I don't need the president to come out and tell us. Who makes me worried is the government, what they're up to for not reporting. And I'd just like to say thank you for your time, George, and thanks, Lee.
Well, thank you. I'm not sure that a hat made out of tinfoil is going to protect anyone from anything.
No, it's not a very good Faraday cage, is it?
But see, you hear stories like this all the time, George. You know, a family member who says that he knows something. He may even have a piece of something that he's got hidden in the attic or in a deep freezer somewhere in the basement. And the people are kind of afraid of well, what do they do with this evidence? James Fox, the great documentary
Good
filmmaker.
Producer. Sure thing.
Yeah, he's put out a reward he's offered $100,000 for anyone who can prove that a film or an image or a piece of debris or an alien finger or a toenail, if it can be passed through a blue ribbon panel, that $100,000 will be yours. And it's all in conjunction with a new movie that he's putting together called the 701. And the 701, for people who don't know, that's the number of UFO reports that the United States Air Force Project Blue Book could not identify. Out of the 12,000 or so reports over a 20-year period of Blue Book, there were 701 that remained unexplained.
Those are the good cases.
Those are the good cases, yeah, because there was just no explanation. And so there is this offer out there to pay someone $100,000. And I've had discussions with James and his co-producers, because it's my feeling that it's not quite enough money, I don't think, for something that could be the biggest story of all time.
All right, back to the phones we go. Let's go to Dan in Orlando, Florida, first-time caller. Skype's open, too, by the way, at George 97313. Go ahead there. Go ahead, Dan.
Hey, George, Pete.
Hi.
Yeah.
Hey, Dan.
I'm glad you started talking about disclosure, because my call was about the new Stephen Greer movie, Sirius.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. And he claims he has the evidence in a little
tiny guy.
Yeah. And I was just wondering, George, are you going to be able to get him on before the premiere?
I think producer Tom has been asking him, so we'll see if we can get him on.
Yeah, because it's going to premiere, I guess, 22nd in
L.A.
April, right in Los Angeles.
Yep, sure is.
So, but do you think that will have an impact, Pete, on true disclosure? Or because he's claiming, I guess, that this is the movie of all movies on disclosure.
You've heard about this, Lee, haven't you?
I understand, and even what James Fox is doing, what he's also saying, and he's done two great documentaries, one called Out of the Blue and the other called I Know What I Saw. Really excellent UFO documentaries that were even widely respected and received by skeptics. And so this new movie, 701, they're hoping that they're going to do the same kind of thing, come up with the best evidence, best information, best videos. I've been talking with them, and they're telling me things that they have connections with people in the military who may be willing to come up with actual footage of actual craft. That would be something. So whether we see footage or a picture from Stephen Greer of an actual being, or if we see a craft in action, those are the kinds of things that I'm personally hoping we'll get to see, because that's what's needed. Something really dramatic has to happen in order to get people, off their rear ends and really taking notice of something that's going on here.
We've got Gino in the Bronx. Welcome to the show. Hey, Gino, go ahead.
Gino in the Bronx.
Thank you for taking my call, gentlemen.
Sure, Gino. Sure.
Your guest did bring up Project Blue Book, which I was going to discuss, but since he cited the statistics, let me put that on a percentage basis. U.S. Air Force investigators, over a period of 22 years, were able to explain 95% of all the alleged UFO sightings, incidents, abductions, and they concluded that most people just confuse natural phenomenon for being extraterrestrial spacecraft or just outright hoaxes of imbeciles who thought they were going to try to connive people by tossing a hubcap into the air and then claiming that was a flying saucer while they photographed it in midair. That 701 cases that you're talking about makes up about 5% that are unexplained. Unexplained because investigators have to use the same standard of proof that they would in a criminal case. It's got to be proof beyond a reasonable doubt, and it's got to hold up in a court of law. It's not a preponderance of the evidence as a civil case would be. And as far as people who have passed lie detector tests, I've had them on my caseload when I was a probation officer here in the city of New York. Professional liars can beat any lie detector test and can fool even the most professional givers of those tests. They're called criminals. They lie, they cheat, they steal, And one last point that I also brought up the last time I called in. Does your guest believe that Einstein was correct when he said that nothing, absolutely nothing, can travel faster than the speed of light without turning into pure energy? Because for illegal aliens from outer space to get to us, they'd have to travel at least near the speed of light and travel years, decades, or even centuries to get to us. Does he honestly believe that they've been here thousands of years, or that there's an alien-human conspiracy to actually control the Earth?
Lee, Gino is our resident skeptic, obviously.
Okay.
And first of all, go ahead, address that, and I want to talk about the propulsion when you're done.
Yeah, so do I. And I have a question for Gino. This comes out of my credibility factor checklist. Okay? The question to you, Gino, is, have you ever read any declassified government documents from the United States or the UK that confirms, and I stress the word, they confirm unexplained UFO encounters by credible military eyewitnesses? And I'm talking high-ranking officials who have actually said, and there are documents, I'm not making this up, you can find these things, and they have said on record that many UFOs from the 1950s and early 60s were not hoaxes. They weren't products of imbecile imaginations, but they were, in fact, real, solid aircraft of some sort that outperformed and outmaneuvered any of our known aircraft. Have you ever seen those documents, Gino?
No, but since you brought up Gordon Cooper, one of the 7 original Mercury astronauts, he was the one who was supposed to be the joker of the group, and everybody that ever listened to his stories knew that he couldn't be trusted when he was off duty. So I'd give you that point. And then the other point that I also brought up before.
Wait, hold on a second, Gino.
About traveling.
Wait, let me say something. Gino, my friends think that I'm a joker. But if I tell a story of something credible that happened to me, just because I've joked around a lot and people think I'm funny, does that mean I'm lying about a UFO encounter I may have had?
It lessens your credibility for sure, doesn't it, sir?
I don't.
My credibility will be lessened if I said that I'm looking directly at an illegal alien from outer space looking at me through the window. But that illegal alien is more likely to come from south of the border than from the Andromeda strain, don't you think?
Well, I don't know, because I don't know what you're looking at, Gino. But I'm just saying that your mind is so closed to the possibility that if anybody has an attitude or a personality where they can tell a joke, then they possibly couldn't be lying, or they couldn't be telling the truth about an extraordinary encounter they may have had that they didn't know they were going to have, and yet they wanted to tell about it. You're sounding like you think that everybody who has these stories are just lying. And I find that very odd that you would take that stance. I mean, if you haven't personally investigated UFOs in a serious way, then I don't think you have a valid opinion to offer on the subject, and because you're promoting an attitude that there's nothing about UFOs that should be seriously researched, and I don't agree with you on that.
Let's talk about the propulsion system, Lee. Obviously, they have learned how to bend space and time. They're coming through portals or wormholes.
Yeah, I know. It's like all this talk, George, about we can't get from here to another star system, so nobody can get from there to here. Well, if somebody is 1,000 years ahead of us technologically, or more than 1,000 years, well, why couldn't they have figured out how to do it? You know, do they need to have fossil fuels to power their ships? I don't think that that's an issue. It shouldn't be an issue, and yet most scientists consider it an issue because they're coming from the attitude or the place of, again, if we can't do it, then nobody else can. There's something wrong with that attitude. You know, 100 years ago, we didn't have airplanes, but now we do. We couldn't do it 100 years ago, but now we can. So what is the problem here with trying to cut through all of this bad stuff that people are still believing in? I don't get it.
Lee, we've got so many people online. I'm going to do open lines tonight, but can you stay for one more hour?
why not?
Okay, we're gonna do that. I mean, all of you, you've been on hold. Some people for 50 minutes. I don't have the heart to just say goodbye. So we're gonna do one more hour with Lee Spiegel as we talk about all mysteries in a moment on Coast to Coast AM, and his website's linked up at coasttocoastam.com. As for me, George at coasttocoastam.com. That's our website. And, of course, don't forget to follow us on Facebook and Twitter. We'll be right back.